The millionaire entered the hospice to visit his sick uncle, but as he crossed one of the corridors, he turned completely pale. Behind the glass door, a woman whispered his name. It was his ex-wife, who had been missing for 10 years, and she remembered everything. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you are watching us. We continue. The sound of Raphael Muller's Italian shoes echoed through the halls of the psychiatric hospital. The 45-year-old businessman, known for his always austere expression and impeccably tailored suit, carried a briefcase of documents as he followed Dr. Martin through the white corridors of the institution. His features, normally inflexible during multi-million-dollar business meetings, seemed slightly troubled on this autumn morning. "This way, Mr. Muller," the doctor said, leading him through a series of security doors. "The files you're looking for should be in our historical records section. Although I should warn you that documents more than a decade old may be incomplete." Raphael nodded mechanically, his gaze wandering over the architectural details of the century-old building. The walls, despite their recent paint job, held the weight of countless stories. The businessman adjusted his tie, an automatic gesture he made whenever he felt uncomfortable. The truth was that he never wanted to be there. The search for the history of his uncle, who had been hospitalized decades ago, was just a bureaucratic formality required by his father's will, who had died 6 months earlier. As they walked down a side corridor, a gentle breeze carried with it a distant melody. Raphael stopped abruptly, causing Dr. Martin to feel strange. The musical notes, delicate and melancholy, seemed to float in the air like the scent of jasmine. It was a song in French, a female voice intoning verses he knew all too well. "That song?" he murmured, more to himself than to his companion. "It must be from the inner garden," the doctor explained. "Some patients usually gather there in the morning for therapeutic activities." Ignoring Dr. Martin's confused expression, Raphael changed his path, following the melody as if in a trance. His steps took him to a glass door that opened onto an interior courtyard, where flower beds created an oasis of color amidst the institutional white of the hospital. It was then that he saw her. Sitting on a stone bench, surrounded by blooming jasmines, was a woman of about 40. Her brown hair, flecked with silver strands, framed a face that time had gently touched. Her fingers moved in the air as if playing an invisible piano, accompanying the music she herself sang. Raphael felt the air escape his lungs. The movement of her hands, her amber eyes looking into the distance, the way she tilted her head slightly as she sang, every detail was a stab of recognition in his chest. "Mr. Muller," Dr. Martin called, concerned about his sudden paleness. But Raphael was no longer listening to her. His feet automatically carried him closer to the woman in the garden. With each step, his heart raced, and the certainties of a whole decade began to crumble. The woman stopped singing as he approached, but she showed no sign of recognition. Her eyes, once so expressive, now held a haze of absence. Raphael felt his legs weaken when he noticed, exposed by the movement of his hands, a small star-shaped scar on his left wrist. It was impossible. It had to be impossible. "Helena?" he whispered, his voice shaking. The woman remained in her own private world, her fingers still dancing in the air. Then, without warning, her lips moved, uttering words that made Raphael's blood run cold. "Mon petit loup," she murmured, using the French nickname that only she used for him, an intimate secret from their happy days. Raphael staggered back, his mind a storm of emotions and memories. There she was, his wife, his love, the woman who had disappeared 10 years ago, leaving only a farewell letter that he had read 1,000 times, trying to understand why she had abandoned him. But now, looking at that familiar yet strange figure, Raphael began to realize that perhaps he had lived an entire decade believing a lie. And that realization was about to change everything he thought he knew about himself, about his father, and about the true meaning of loss and redemption. Dr. Martin watched the scene with growing interest. In her 15 years of working at the hospital, she had never witnessed such an intense reaction from a visitor. The businessman, who minutes before had emanated an aura of authoritative indifference, now seemed completely vulnerable, like a lost child. "Mr. Muller, do you know?" "The patient?" she asked, approaching cautiously. Raphael struggled to find his voice. She's my wife, Helena Muller." The doctor quickly consulted her notes, confused. "There must be some mistake. This is patient 2847, admitted approximately 10 years ago. Her registered name is Myriam Delorme, with no documented surname." "No," Raphael shook his head vehemently. "That scar on her wrist. She got it when we were young, on our first trip to Paris. She broke a champagne flute and cut herself. The doctor said it would leave a star-shaped mark." As they talked, a middle-aged nurse approached the group, drawn by the unusual commotion. Her eyes widened as she recognized Raphael. "Excuse me for intruding," she said, "but I couldn't help overhearing. My name is Clara Aubert, and I'm the nurse in charge of this ward. And Mr. Muller, I met Helena." It was as if lightning had struck the garden. Raphael turned sharply to the nurse, who continued, "We studied music together at college. She was an extraordinary pianist. When I started working here, something about this patient seemed familiar to me, but I never made the connection." Helena remained seated, seemingly oblivious to the commotion around her, her fingers still playing their silent melody. Raphael approached again, kneeling before her. Gently, he touched her hand. "Mon petit loup," she repeated, her eyes finally meeting his, albeit through a haze of confusion. Clara covered her mouth with her hands. "That's what she called her boyfriend in college. She said it was a secret between them because he seemed so serious in public, but he had a wild side that only she knew about." Dr. Martin intervened, her professional expression masking her own puzzlement. "Mr. Muller, if what you say is true, we need to investigate immediately. This patient's admission records are peculiar. There are gaps in the documentation that never made sense." "I want to see every record," Raphael demanded, his voice regaining some of its usual authority, even though his hands were still shaking. "Every paper, every note, every detail from the last 10 years. Clara, the nurse, hesitated for a moment before speaking. "There is something else you need to see. In her room she keeps a notebook. She spent years drawing in it, writing down random sentences, musical scores. We never paid much attention to it, but now." They then went to a simple room at the end of the hallway. The walls were decorated with drawings, landscapes, abstract faces, and one that immediately caught Raphael's attention, a house by the sea, with precise architectural details that he would recognize anywhere. "Our honeymoon home," he murmured, touching the drawing reverently. "She even drew the jasmine vine we planted together on the porch." Clara opened a drawer and took out a leather-bound notebook, its pages yellowed with age. As she leafed through it, fragments of a fragmented mind revealed themselves. Incomplete sheet music, phrases in French, and more drawings, all connected in some way to the life Helena and Raphael had shared. "How is this possible?" Dr. Martin asked, more to herself than to anyone else. "Initial records indicate that she was admitted after being found disoriented at a bus station, without documents. But these drawings, these memories..." Raphael held the notebook as if it were the most precious object in the world. On one of the pages he found a sentence that made his heart stop. "Mon petit loup, why don't you look for me? Have they made you forget too?" Reality was beginning to unfold before him, more terrifying than any nightmare. Helena had not abandoned him. She had been taken from him, and now, looking at the date of her admission, a morbid coincidence was revealed. It was exactly 1 week after she had mentioned that she had found something disturbing in the financial records of the Muller family company. Dr. Martin's office was filled with folders and documents spread out on the desk. Raphael, Clara, and the doctor examined each paper meticulously, searching for clues about Helena's past. The air conditioning hummed softly, the only sound other than the rustling of papers and occasional sighs of frustration. "Something's wrong here," Clara muttered, adjusting her glasses as she studied a chart. "The medical reports have serious inconsistencies. The dates don't match. There are clearly pages that have been removed, and the signatures, some look different from the same doctor." Raphael looked up from the documents he was examining. Who was the doctor responsible for her admission? "Dr. Alan Vass," Dr. Martin replied. consulting an old file. He retired 5 years ago. He was known for his closeness to the hospital's major donors. A flash of recognition crossed Raphael's face. Vas, he was a friend of my father's. He had dinner at our house at least once a month. Clara found something in a yellowed folder. Look at this. A series of large bank deposits made to the institution, all in the months following Helena's hospitalization. The source: the Muller Foundation for Mental Health Support. My father started this foundation, Raphael whispered, his voice cracking with discovery. He always said it was, in memory of my mother, who suffered from depression. Dr. Martin frowned, quickly flipping through another set of documents. Here, express orders for the patient's isolation, signed by Dr. Vass. No outside visitors, restricted access to the telephone, censorship of correspondence, all justified as protective measures due to the patient's delicate mental state. Raphael stood up abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, the garden where he had found Helena was still visible, now empty in the late afternoon. His hands were shaking when he finally spoke. The week before her disappearance, Helena was acting strangely, anxious. She worked in the company's finance department and had access to all the records. One night, she came home pale and said she needed to tell me something important about my father and the company. We arranged to talk the next day after she had organized some documents. But that conversation never happened, Clara added, softly. No. The next morning I found only a letter. It said she had to go, that our life together had been a mistake, that I deserved someone better. The letter, it was in French, the way she used to write to me. It seemed authentic. I believed it. Dr. Martin removed a manila envelope from a locked drawer in her file cabinet. I just found these. They're letters she's written over the years. They've never been sent. With trembling hands, Raphael opened the envelope. Dozens of letters fell onto the table, all written in Helena's delicate handwriting. He began to read one of them aloud. Mon petit loup, today I saw a little bird in the garden that reminded me of you. It had serious eyes, like yours in board meetings, but it also carried a hidden sweetness. Do you still play the piano on Sunday? Nights? Do you still make that coffee with cardamom that only you knew how to make just right? I try to remember everything because I'm afraid they'll make me forget completely. Clara wiped away a discreet tear. She never forgot. Even with all the medication, even with the treatments, some memories remained. Here, Dr. Martin called, holding up a partially charred document. A warrant for involuntary commitment, signed by Anton Muller, her father, Mr. Raphael. He presented himself as her legal guardian, claiming that Helena suffered from psychotic episodes and posed a risk to herself. Raphael felt the weight of a decade of lies crashing down on his shoulders. My own father, he locked her in here, destroyed our life, our love, everything. Why? A noise at the door interrupted their conversation. It was one of the hospital security guards. Dr. Martin, there's an urgent call from the board of directors for you about the case they're investigating. The doctor exchanged worried glances with Clara and Raphael. Attempts to cover up the case have already begun. We need to act quickly. I will not allow the truth to be buried again, Raphael declared, his voice regaining its characteristic firmness. Helena has spent 10 years trapped in a nightmare. Now it is time to wake her. Clara quickly organized the most important documents. I know journalists who would love to investigate this story, and I have contacts at the Regional Medical Council. No, Raphael interrupted. First, I need to get Helena out of here. I need to get her home where she'll be safe, then we'll get justice. Dr. Martin nodded slowly. I can begin the transfer process. As the attending physician, I can attest that a family environment would be most beneficial to your recovery. But we must act within the law, Mr. Muller. This time, everything will be done in the open. The Muller Mansion, an imposing building in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, was being prepared to welcome its new inhabitants. Raphael personally supervised every detail of the renovation of the East Wing, transforming it into a welcoming and therapeutic space for Helena. The E. Curtains must be in soft tones, he instructed the decorators. And I want jasmine, Lots of jasmine in the winter garden. Clara, who had asked for leave from the hospital to help Helena adjust, watched the changes with approval. You're recreating elements of her past. This may help in the process of recovering. Her memories. A Steinway grand piano recently arrived from Germany took pride of place in the main room. Raphael ran his fingers over the keys, remembering the nights when Helena would play for him, filling the house with French melodies. I've got her transferred for tomorrow, he announced, his voice a mix of anxiety and hope. Dr. Martin has prepared all the documents. This time everything is absolutely legal and transparent. Clara smiled, but her expression quickly turned serious. Raphael, I need to tell you something. Yesterday, while I was helping Helena pack her things at the hospital, she had a moment of lucidity. She grabbed my hand and said, "He threatened me with a red folder." Raphael froze. Red. Folder? Yes, it repeated several times. Then it returned to its usual state. Does it mean something to you? The businessman walked to the window, looking out at the garden where a team of landscapers were planting jasmine seedlings. My father kept a red folder in his safe. When he passed away, I looked everywhere for it, but I could never find it. Do you think it could be related to what Helena discovered at the company? I'm sure, he replied, turning to face Clara. And I'm going to find out what it is, even if I have to turn over every stone in this house. The next morning, a small entourage arrived at the mansion. Helena, accompanied by Dr. Martin and 2 nurses, entered what would be her new home. Her eyes wandered around the room, taking in details: the wallpaper with small flowers, the scent of jasmine, the soft light that entered through the large windows. When she reached the piano room, something changed in her expression. She approached the instrument as if drawn by an invisible magnet. Her fingers, which had been playing melodies in the air for so long, finally found real keys. The first notes of La Vie en Rose filled the room. Raphael, standing in the doorway, felt tears streaming down his face. It was the song she had played, the first time he had seen her at the conservatory where she was studying. "Mon petit loup," Helena whispered, still playing. "You took so long." Clara and Dr. Martin exchanged hopeful glances. It was the first clear sign of recognition since her admission. "I'm here now," Raphael replied, approaching slowly so as not to break the moment. "And I'm never leaving your side again." Helena continued playing, but her hands were shaking slightly. "The folder, he showed me the red folder. He said you would be harmed if I said anything. He said he had evidence against you, too." Raphael sat down next to her on the piano bench. "Who, Helena, who showed you the folder?" For a moment she seemed to fight the fog that usually dominated her mind. "Your father and the doctor. They said it was best if I disappeared. That it was the only way to protect you." The music stopped abruptly. Helena brought her hands to her face as if trying to hold back the memories that threatened to escape. Clara quickly approached with a glass of water and her medicine. "I think that's enough for today," Dr. Martin advised. "Every memory recovered is a victory, but we need to respect her timing." Raphael nodded, watching as the nurses led Helena to her new room. When he was alone with Clara and the doctor, his expression hardened. "I need to find that folder," he declared. "If my father used it to threaten Helena, it must contain proof of the wrongdoing she uncovered. And maybe this is our chance to finally get justice." Clara placed a hand on his shoulder. "And we will find it. But first, focus on Helena. Every moment of her lucidity is precious. Every memory recovered is a step toward the truth." Helena's adaptation to the mansion progressed slowly. After a week, she had already established a routine. She spent her mornings in the conservatory, afternoons exploring the house as if trying to reconnect with lost memories, and evenings invariably at the piano, strumming melodies that seemed to emerge from the depths of her soul. Raphael divided his time between taking care of her and discreetly rummaging through his father's old belongings, looking for clues about the mysterious red folder. That afternoon, while rummaging through the office for the 100th time, he was surprised by Clara. "I found something interesting," the nurse said, coming into the room with a photo album. "Helena spent all morning looking at these old photos, and look at this." She opened the album to a specific page. It was a photo of Raphael and Helena's wedding, but one detail caught her attention. In the background of the image, partially visible, there was a red folder on an office desk. "This photo," Raphael murmured, adjusting his glasses to see better. "It was taken on our wedding day when we came to get some documents before leaving for our honeymoon." Clara pointed to another detail. "Look at the bookshelf in the back. That arrangement of books is different from the current one." Raphael stood up quickly, approaching the mahogany bookcase that took up the entire wall of the office. His eyes scanned the shelves, comparing them with the photograph. "Some books have been removed," he noted, running his fingers over the empty spaces, "and others have been added." He began to remove volumes methodically, Clara helping with the task. That was when they noticed. Behind a row of thick volumes of business law, there was a small metal door, practically imperceptible if not looked for. "A safe," Raphael whispered. "But it's not the main safe I knew." "Can you open it?" He examined. "The mechanism. It's an old model with a traditional lock. The key must be somewhere." That moment, they were interrupted by one of the nurses. "Mr. Muller, Helena is asking for you. She seems agitated." They found Helena in the winter garden, sitting among the jasmines. Her hands were shaking as she held a piece of paper. "Mon petit loup," she called when she saw Raphael. "I remembered something. The key, he always carried it in his watch." Raphael knelt down beside her. "What key, Helena?" "What watch?" "Your father," she answered, her voice clearer than usual. "His gold pocket watch. It opened a secret compartment when he turned the minute hand to 9. Clara and Raphael exchanged surprised glances. The pocket watch was a family heirloom that Raphael had inherited, but he had never paid much attention to it. "How do you know that?" he asked softly. Helena closed her eyes, as if searching for the memory in a distant place. The day he showed me the red folder. He opened the watch in front of me, took out the key. He said it was his life insurance, that no one would ever find it." Her voice trailed off and she retreated back into her inner world. Raphael kissed her forehead affectionately before standing up. "The watch is in my room," he said to Clara. "In a box, with his other personal belongings." Minutes later, they were back in the office. Raphael held the golden watch in trembling hands. Following Helena's instructions, he turned the minute hand to the number 9. With a soft click, the US back of the watch opened, revealing a hidden compartment where a small brass key rested. "Amazing," Clara murmured. After all this time, she retained that detail. Raphael approached the safe hidden behind the books. The key fit perfectly. With a soft creak, the door opened. The interior was surprisingly spacious. In addition to various documents, there was a brown envelope and, at the bottom, the famous red folder. "Let me see this first," Clara said, taking the envelope. As she opened it, her eyebrows rose. "These are pictures. Pictures of Helena, in the last few days before she was admitted." Raphael picked up the photographs with shaking hands. They were surveillance footage. Helena coming and going from work, eating lunch in restaurants, always with a worried expression. The last photos showed her holding a folder of documents. "They followed her," Raphael said, his voice cracking. "They monitored her every step before they did what they did." Clara placed a hand on his shoulder. "What about the red folder?" Raphael took a deep breath before reaching for it. It was heavier than it looked, filled with documents. On the first page, a title caught his eye. "Operation Phoenix, Transfer of Offshore Assets." The contents of the red folder revealed an intricate web of illegal financial transactions. Spreadsheets, contracts, and memos detailed how the Muller Company had created a complex structure to divert funds through shell companies abroad. "That explains everything," Raphael murmured, scanning the documents. "Helena worked in the finance department. She must have found out about these operations." Clara looked through some papers. "But why did your father react so extreme? Why didn't he just try to buy her silence, as usually happens in these cases?" "Because she wasn't just anyone," Raphael replied, his voice thick with sudden understanding. "She was my wife, part of the family. She knew too much, she was too close, and most of all, He paused, picking up a wedding photo from among the documents. She had unshakable principles. At that moment, they heard music coming from downstairs. Helena was back at the piano, playing a melody that Raphael didn't immediately recognize. "Let's go down," Clara suggested, carefully putting away the documents. "She's having more moments of lucidity. Every moment is precious." They found Helena, completely absorbed in the music. Her fingers danced over the keys with a confidence she had not shown in days. The melody was complex, original. "I've never heard that song before," Raphael commented, sitting down next to the piano. Helena stopped, playing, turning to him with a different, more present look. "I composed you there. When the memories started to slip away, I turned them into music. It was the only way to not forget completely." Raphael felt his heart tighten. Clara, realizing the intensity of the moment, discreetly kept her distance. "What else have you kept in music, mon amour?" he asked softly. Helena closed her eyes, her hands returning to the keys. A new melody filled the room, this time more melancholic. "The numbers," she murmured between notes. "I turned the numbers into notes. Every transaction, every bill, it became a score in my head. It was the only way I could feel safe keeping that information." Raphael and Clara exchanged surprised looks. Helena continued playing, her voice gaining strength. "Your father found out. The day he confronted me, I was transcribing the melodies. He understood that. I had turned the evidence into music, something he couldn't just destroy. The music became more intense, more complex. Clara, who had a musical background, began to notice a pattern. "Raphael," she called softly, "these aren't just random notes. There's a mathematical sequence here. Helena has turned the transaction numbers into musical code." Helena stopped abruptly, turning to Clara with a sad smile. "Do you see the numbers in the music too? I thought I was alone in this. Madness." "It's not madness," Clara replied, coming closer. "It's genius. You found a way to preserve the truth when they tried to erase it." Raphael watched the scene with a mixture of admiration and pain. His Helena, even in the darkest moments, had found a way to resist, to keep alive the truth they tried to bury. "We need to record these songs," he said finally. "Every note, every measure. If you've turned the evidence into a melody, we can do it the other way around." Clara was already picking up her phone. "I'll call a friend from the conservatory. He's an expert in music transcription. We can record everything, analyze each sequence." Helena played again, this time a softer melody. "Sometimes, when the music comes, the memories come back clearer, as if each note opens a locked door in my mind." Raphael took her hand gently. "And we will open each of these doors, mon amour, together. There is nothing left to fear now." Clara watched the scene with emotion, realizing that they were facing not only a crucial test but a true miracle of love and human endurance. Helena's music was not just a coded denunciation. It was a testament to how art can preserve truth, even in the darkest moments. Professor Martin Weber, a renowned musicologist at the National Conservatory, sat beside Helena at the piano, his eyes shining with fascination as she played. Clara had convinced him to come to the mansion with the promise of something extraordinary, and now he understood why. "Extraordinary," he murmured, making quick notes on his sheet music. "You've created a complete system of musical coding. Each sequence of notes corresponds to a specific series of numbers." Helena continued playing, her fingers flowing over the keys with mathematical precision. Raphael watched from the nearby armchair, still marveling at his wife's ingenuity. "Look here," the professor continued, showing Clara his notes. "This particular progression repeats itself at regular intervals. It's like bank account numbers turned into a melody." Clara nodded, also making her own notes. "What about the variations in time and intensity? Do they mean something too?" "Absolutely," Weber replied, adjusting his glasses. "The crescendos and diminuendos seem to indicate the magnitude of the values. It's an incredibly sophisticated system." Helena stopped playing for a moment, her eyes meeting Raphael's. "The loudest songs were the highest values. The softest ones, the smallest transfers. I needed to make sure I could remember. Raphael stood up, approaching the piano. And you succeeded, mon amour. You kept everything in a place where no one could steal it. Professor Weber began to organize his notes into sequence. With a few more recording and analysis sessions, I can create a complete correspondence table. Every note, every musical variation, can be converted back into financial data. Clara, who was on the phone, hung up with a worried expression. Raphael, we need to talk, in private. They walked away to the office while the professor continued working with Helena. What happened? Raphael asked, closing the door. I got a call from Dr. Martin. Someone from the hospital board is asking questions about Helena's transfer. What's more, they tried to access her old files overnight. Raphael frowned. There are still people trying to cover up what happened. Yes, but there's more, Clara continued. One of the former nurses contacted me. He said that Dr. Vass is not really retired to the beach like everyone thinks. He continues to receive regular payments from an offshore company. Raphael took some documents from the red folder. Let me guess, one of the companies mentioned here? Clara nodded. Exactly. And there's more. The nurse said that on the night Helena was admitted, there was a private meeting between her father, Dr. Vass, and someone else, an important figure in the financial world. Roland Aubert, Raphael murmured, my father's main partner at the time. He retired a few months after Helena disappeared, moved abroad. We need to find him, Clara said. He could be the missing piece of this puzzle. From downstairs, the music started again. A different melody, more urgent. That's a new one, Raphael observed. They descended quickly. Helena was playing with renewed intensity, her hands moving purposefully over the keys. Professor Weber watched in fascination, taking frantic notes. It's about that night, Helena said, still playing. The meeting, I was hiding in the next room, listening to everything. I turned the conversation into music, too. Raphael knelt beside the piano. What did you hear, mon amour? Names, she said, the music growing more complex. Dates, places. Roland said he had a safe place in the south of France, an old village. He said they'd keep everything there until things calmed down. Professor Weber looked up from his notes. This is fascinating. The structure of this piece is completely different. There's a geographical pattern here, like coordinates. Clara picked up her tablet, starting to search. South of France, old village, Roland Aubert. Her eyes widened. I found it. A property registered in the name of one of the offshore companies. In a village called Saint-Rémy-de-Provence. The last transfers were made to French bank accounts, Raphael recalled, consulting the documents in the red folder. Everything fits. Helena continued playing, her music now calmer, as if she had completed her mission. Professor Weber had stacks of notes around him. With a few more days of work, he said, I will be able to translate every detail of these melodies. It is as if you have created a new language, where each note tells a story. Raphael watched his wife with renewed admiration. Even when they tried to silence her, she had found a way to preserve the truth, transforming cold numbers into living art. It was more than a system of coding. It was an act of resistance through beauty. The mansion's library had been transformed into a research center. Maps of France covered one table, while on another Professor Weber continued his meticulous analysis of Helena's scores. Clara organized a timeline of photos and documents connecting events with colored threads. It's amazing how everything connects, she noted, attaching another photo to her timeline. Every decision, every move was carefully planned. Raphael, who had just hung up the phone, joined them. I got more information about the villa in Saint-Rémy. The property is still active, with regular maintenance expenses being paid through one of the offshore companies. Professor Weber looked up from his notes. Gentlemen, I think I've decoded something important here. This particular musical sequence that Helena plays, it repeats itself in subtle variations, always following a numerical pattern that corresponds to dates and values. Clara walked over to examine the notes. Are these the main transfers? Exactly, Weber confirmed. And there's more. Between the main notes, there are little cadences that seem to indicate coded names. Helena created a system where each person involved had their own musical signature. Helena, who'd been sitting quietly in a corner of the library, suddenly stood up and walked over to the wall-mounted piano that decorated the room. Her fingers found the keys with familiar precision. Roland had a low touch, she said, playing a series of low notes. His father was in the middle notes, more understated. The doctor, she switched to higher notes. He was always in the high notes, shrill. Raphael sat down next to him on the piano bench. And me? What notes were mine? A soft smile lit Helena's face. Her fingers danced over the keys in a sweet, perfectly balanced melody. You were all the good notes, mon petit loup, the ones that made me smile even on the darkest days. Clara discreetly wiped away a tear as she continued to organize the documents. I found something interesting here. In the months leading up to the incident, there had been a series of meetings between your father and Roland in Paris, always at the same hotel. Le Petit Jardin, Helena added unexpectedly, her hands still on the piano. The hotel had an indoor garden with jasmine. I followed them there once, when I began to suspect the strange dealings. Professor Weber made a quick note. This explains why certain melodies have a pattern that recalls traditional French music. You have incorporated elements of the environment into your musical code. Raphael glanced at his watch. I have a video call in 10 minutes with a private investigator in Paris. He's tracking Roland Aubert's movements in the area. I'll come with you, Clara said, gathering up some documents. We need to show him the photos of the property in Saint-Rémy. As they left, Professor Weber approached Helena with a sheet of music in his hands. Mrs. Helena, there is something that intrigues me. This sequence here, it appears at crucial moments in the composition, but it is different from the others, more personal. Helena examined the notes and began to play them softly. It's the music of our first meeting. Raphael was having a meeting at the conservatory where I studied. I was playing this same melody when our eyes met for the first time. She continued playing, her voice gaining strength with each note. I interspersed this melody between the numbers and the names. It was my way of leaving a message for Raphael in case he ever found out, so he would know that, even lost amidst so many dark secrets, our love remained intact. Weber made a few more notes, visibly moved. You didn't just preserve evidence. You created a love letter encoded in music. From the office came Raphael's voice on his video call. Helena smiled, her hands still dancing over the piano keys. You know, Professor, during all those years in the hospital, I was afraid that the memories would disappear completely. But the music was always there, because some things are too strong to be erased. The Parisian autumn was painting the streets in golden hues when Raphael and Clara landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport. The decision to travel to France had been made after discovering that Roland Aubert would be making a rare public appearance at a charity event at the Hotel Le Petit Jardin. Helena is in good company, Clara assured her as they drove across town in the taxi. Professor Weber is making incredible progress with the musical transcriptions, and Dr. Martin has increased the frequency of her visits. Raphael nodded, his gaze lost in the familiar streets of the city, where he and Helena had shared so many happy moments. She insisted we come. She said we had to follow the music to the end. The Hotel Le Petit Jardin was still as elegant as Helena had described in her melodies. The interior garden, with its well-tended jasmines, seemed to have come straight from her memories. Monsieur Muller, a discreet voice addressed them. It was Philippe Dubois, the private investigator they had hired. I have important news. Roland Aubert arrived 2 hours ago. He is staying in the presidential suite. Clara consulted her tablet. The benefit starts at 8 p.m. We have a few hours to prepare. There's more, Philippe continued, lowering his voice. I've gained access to hotel records from 10 years ago. Your father and Roland met here exactly 3 days before your wife disappeared. Raphael felt a shiver run down his spine. Helena was right. She followed them here. Oui, Philippe confirmed. And not only that, I found records of a third person at those meetings, Dr. André Laurent, a renowned psychiatrist from Paris who specializes in experimental treatments for amnesia. Clara's eyes widened. They planned the whole thing. It wasn't just a forced hospitalization. They deliberately chose a treatment that could erase her memories. Night was falling over Paris as they entered the ballroom. Europe's elite milled about, sipping champagne and chatting elegantly. Roland Aubert, still imposing at 75, was the center of attention in a group near the grand piano. "The resemblance is striking," Clara murmured. "The piano, the jasmines in the garden. Helena has recreated this entire setting in her music." Raphael adjusted his suit, preparing for the confrontation he had been waiting for a decade. But before he could approach Roland, a familiar melody filled the air. The pianist hired for the event began playing the same song that Helena used to play, the song that contained the codes for the secret transactions. Roland Aubert froze mid-sentence, his face draining of color. His eyes met Raphael's across the room. "Impossible," the old businessman whispered, staggering slightly. Raphael approached calmly, Clara at his side. "Good evening, Roland. It's been a long time." "Raphael, what does this mean?" "It's a beautiful melody, isn't it?" Raphael commented casually. "Helena composed it especially to store the numbers of the offshore accounts. Each note, a transaction. Each variation, a name." Roland's face alternated between red and white. "I don't know what you're talking about. Your wife is." "At home," Raphael interrupted, "recovering from what you did to her. And you know what's most interesting? She turned every detail of your plan into music, including the meetings here, in this very hotel." Clara discreetly filmed Roland's reaction with her cell phone, while other guests began to pay attention to the conversation. "You have no proof," Roland whispered. Raphael smiled serenely. "I have the red folder. I have Helena's songs already decoded. I have the records of the meetings with Dr. Laurent. And now," he gestured to the piano, "I have your reaction to the melody Helena created, the same one she played while you conspired to silence her." The pianist continued to play, each note a silent accusation. Roland Aubert looked around, noticing the curious looks of his guests. "What do you want?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to come with me to Saint-Rémy-de-Provence," Raphael replied. "I want you to open the village's safes and show me exactly where you hid the original documents. And then I want you to tell the truth, all of it." Philippe Dubois approached discreetly. "Monsieur Aubert, there are 2 investigators from the French financial police waiting outside. They are very interested in the information we have uncovered about certain international transactions." Roland Aubert, the powerful businessman who had helped destroy Helena's life, suddenly seemed very small and very old. "She should never have found out," he murmured. "Your wife? She was too brilliant for her own good." "No," Raphael corrected. "She had too much integrity to allow you to steal millions in public money. And now, every note she composed will help reveal the truth." While Raphael and Clara confronted Roland Aubert in Paris at the Muller mansion, Helena made astonishing progress. Sitting at the piano with Professor Weber, she played increasingly complex sequences, recovering memories through music. "It's extraordinary," the professor commented, taking frantic notes. "Every melody you play reveals more details of the scheme you've discovered. It's as if you've created a complete musical archive." Dr. Martin, who observed the session, added, "The process of memory retrieval through music is fascinating. The neural connections Helena has established are unique." Helena stopped playing for a moment, her eyes focused on an old sheet of music. "I remember the day I realized what was happening. I was reviewing financial reports when I noticed a pattern in the transfers, numbers that repeated at precise intervals, like a musical measure." "And that's how you started turning data into—" "Music?" Weber asked. "Oui," Helena replied, playing softly again. "Every suspicious transaction became a sequence of notes. Every name involved had its own musical theme. It was my way of documenting everything without leaving any obvious traces." At that moment, the phone rang. It was Clara, calling from Paris. "Helena," her voice was excited. "You were right about everything. We found Roland, confronted him. Charette le petit jardin. When the pianist played his music, he practically confessed. A serene smile lit up Helena's face. The Jasmine Garden. He was always careless with details. I knew the music would catch him off guard. Raphael is now with him on his way to Saint-Rémy, Clara continued. The French financial police are following everything. We will recover the original documents. After hanging up, Helena returned to the piano with renewed energy. Her hands danced over the keys, creating a melody that Professor Weber had never heard before. This is new, he noted. It's the Song of Liberation, Helena replied, her eyes shining. I'm writing it now, to celebrate the moment when the truth finally comes to light. Dr. Martin scribbled notes in her chart, marveling at her patient's progress. Her mind has found an extraordinary way to preserve not only information, but also her very essence through music. Professor Weber began to organize his scores. When we have finished transcribing and decoding all of his compositions, we will have the most unique and creative record of a financial scheme ever documented. It will be studied for generations. Helena continued to play, but now her melodies had a different tone, no longer of denunciation or preservation, but of celebration and hope. You know, she said, still playing, all those years in the hospital, music was my only connection to reality. Even when they tried to erase my memories, the melodies remained. Each note was a promise that one day the truth would be heard. On the table next to the piano, the phone vibrated with a message from Raphael. We found everything, mon amour. Every document you discovered is here. Exactly where your song indicated. You did it. We did it. Helena smiled, her hands creating chords of pure joy. Professor Weber quickly began to write down the new composition, realizing that they were witnessing the birth of something special. This melody, Helena said, is for all the people who have ever been silenced. To remind them that truth always finds a way to express itself, even if it is through a simple song. Dr. Martin watched with tears in her eyes, realizing that she was witnessing one of the most extraordinary cases of her career, not just of medical recovery, but of triumph of the human spirit. Music, Helena continued, her voice blending with the piano notes, was my way of resisting, of maintaining my essence when they tried to erase it. Each melody was a promise of reunion with Mon Petit Loup, a guarantee that our love would survive any silence. The villa in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence was an imposing 18th-century building surrounded by fields of lavender that stretched as far as the eye could see. Raphael watched as Roland Aubert, with trembling hands, inserted an ancient key into the lock of a safe hidden behind a carved wooden panel. Helena always had an extraordinary sense of pattern, Roland said, his voice thick with a mixture of admiration and regret. When she started playing those strange melodies on the company piano, we didn't think much of it. Who would have guessed she was turning our transactions into music? The safe opened with a soft click, revealing neat stacks of documents, external drives, and a series of leather-bound notebooks. The originals, Roland whispered. Every report, every piece of evidence your wife discovered. We kept them all here thinking they would be safe forever. Clara, who had been methodically photographing each document with her tablet, found something interesting. Raphael, look at this. These are Dr. Laurent's notes on Helena's treatment. The document detailed an experimental drug protocol designed to induce a state of mental confusion and subsequently weaken recent memories. Raphael felt his stomach churn. The plan was never to just silence her, he said, his voice tight. You wanted to make sure she truly forgot everything she had discovered. Roland sat down heavily in an old armchair. Your father, he was convinced it was the only solution. Helena knew too much and had too much integrity to be bought. Commitment seemed the safest course. Safe for who? Clara questioned harshly. You stole 10 years of her life. Philippe Dubois, who was leading the team of French investigators, approached with a sealed envelope. Monsieur Moeller, we have found something that may be of particular interest to your wife. Inside the envelope was an old handwritten piece of sheet music. The notes in the margins were unmistakably Helena's. Mon Dieu, Raphael murmured. It's the original score. The First time she put the numbers to music. Roland watched the paper with a distant expression. She was playing this the day we confronted her. When her father recognized the numbers on the notes, that's when we realized what she had done. Clara continued to document everything. Dr. Weber will be fascinated. This completes the circle of Helena's musical coding. One of the French investigators, who was examining bank records, made a discovery. Monsieur, we have found regular transfers to an account in Switzerland. The beneficiary is Dr. Vass. The hospital doctor, Raphael added, so he kept getting paid all these years to keep the scheme a secret. Roland Aubert seemed to have aged decades that afternoon. We created a perfect prison. Money bought the silence of everyone involved. While Helena languished in that hospital, her memories systematically erased. Raphael held the sheet music with reverential care. But you underestimated her strength. Helena turned her prison into music, preserved the truth in a form that no one could destroy. Clara, who was on the phone with Professor Weber, smiled. He said Helena has just composed a new piece, a celebration of truth coming to light. She was always extraordinary, Roland said, his voice breaking. Her intelligence, her integrity. We should have realized that not even our most sophisticated methods could completely erase who she was. Raphael carefully kept the original sheet music. You know what's ironic? If you had simply faced the consequences of your actions 10 years ago, perhaps there would have been a chance for redemption. But what you did to Helena, that is unforgivable. The investigators continued their methodical work, cataloguing every document, every piece of evidence of the elaborate scheme that had cost Helena a decade of her life. The Provence sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of pink and lavender. Let's take all of this back to her, Raphael said, looking out the villa window. Every document, every piece of evidence. Helena deserves to see that her music not only preserved the truth, but finally brought justice. Clara finished organizing her digital files, and most importantly, she needs to know that she will never again have to turn her pain into melody to survive. Now she can make music simply for the love of it. At the Muller mansion, Professor Weber worked tirelessly on transcribing Helena's latest melodies. Each new song revealed more details of the financial scheme, more depth to her ingenious coding system. It's as if each composition is a page from a secret diary, he explained to Dr. Martin, who was watching the process. Helena didn't just record numbers and transactions, she documented emotions, moments, people. Helena was in the winter garden, surrounded by her beloved jasmines, when she received Raphael's call. Mon amour. His voice was filled with emotion. We found everything. Your original sheet music, the documents, the evidence of Dr. Laurent's involvement. You were right about every detail. Silent tears ran down Helena's face. The melodies. They kept our secrets well, didn't they? Perfectly, Raphael replied. Roland confessed everything. The scheme, the conspiracy, the forced treatment, and Helena. We found something else. Something you need to see. She adjusted the phone, curious. What is it, mon petit loup? Letters, he said softly. Dozens of them, all written by me to you over the past 10 years. They intercepted them at the hospital, never allowed them to reach you. Helena felt her heart race. Did you write to me? Every week, Raphael's voice cracked. Even though I thought you had left me, I couldn't stop writing. It was my way of keeping you alive in my heart. Professor Weber, who was organizing his scores near the garden, noticed when Helena stood up and walked to the piano. Her hands found the keys with a different softness. I'm writing something new, she said over the phone. A song for all the letters I couldn't read, for all the love they tried to steal from us. The melody that was born was different from all the previous ones. There were no hidden codes, no numbers transformed into notes. It was pure emotion, pure love translated into music. It's beautiful, Raphael whispered, listening through the phone. Professor Weber quickly began transcribing the new composition, realizing that he was witnessing something unique. This music, it's different. There are no mathematical patterns. There are no codes. It's as if, like she was finally free to just feel, Dr. Martin added, noting the transformation in her patient. Helena continued playing, her hands dancing over the keys with a lightness she hadn't shown in years. You know, mon amour, for so long, music was my only way of keeping the truth. Now it can be just what it was always meant to be, an expression of love. Clara, who was with Raphael in Saint-Rémy, was also listening to the new composition over the phone. It's like a rebirth, she said emotionally. We're going home tomorrow, Raphael said. With all the evidence, all your original scores, all my letters, we'll finally be able to reconstruct not only the truth, but our love story. Helena smiled, her hands creating ever brighter chords. Music has always brought us back to each other, hasn't it? Even when they tried to tear us apart, the melodies kept our connection alive. Professor Weber, who had finished transcribing the new composition, approached the piano. Mrs. Helena, this piece, I think we have found a perfect name for it. Which one? She asked, still playing. Renaissance d'amour, he replied softly. Because that is exactly what we are witnessing, the rebirth of a love that not even oblivion could erase. Raphael's arrival at the mansion was a moment of intense emotion. Helena was waiting for him at the piano, playing the new composition she had created, Renaissance d'amour. When he entered carrying an old box full of undelivered letters, the music took on a different intensity. Mon petit loup, she whispered, her hands still on the keys, you brought back our memories. Raphael placed the box on the piano and sat. Down next to her, Clara and Professor Weber watched discreetly from the entrance to the room, aware that they were witnessing a precious moment. Every letter, Raphael said, his voice breaking, was written on Sunday nights. Do you remember? That was when we always played the piano together. Helena stopped playing, her fingers gently caressing the yellowed letters. On Sundays, I always asked to have access to the hospital piano. Even without knowing why, my heart, I knew it was our special moment. Clara came over with a cup of jasmine tea, one of the small routines they had established to help Helena feel safe. The doctors always noticed that she was more lucid on Sundays, especially during the time they usually played together. Professor Weber, who was organizing his notes on a nearby table, added, It's fascinating how the brain finds ways to preserve the most important connections, even under extreme circumstances. Helena picked up the first card from the pile, her hands shaking slightly. Raphael hugged her, and together they began to read. My Helena, today the piano is silent, as it has been every Sunday since you left. I try to play our favorite songs, but without you the melodies seem incomplete. How is it possible that something as simple as a musical note can carry so much of someone's essence? Silent tears streamed down Helena's face as she read. With amity, each word more memories seemed to awaken in her mind. I wrote to you too, she revealed softly. In my notebook of sheet music, among the coded melodies, were letters. Letters I never thought I would get to send. Clara, who had become not only a nurse but a close friend, brought the notebook that Helena mentioned. Among the pages of complex musical notation were texts in French, declarations of love and longing interspersed with the codes that had preserved the truth. Mon amour, read one of the pages. Today the garden is in bloom, and each jasmine reminds me of us. Do you still cultivate those seedlings we planted together? Do you still smile when you smell their scent in the air? Raphael held Helena's hand tighter. Every single seedling survived. I cared for them every day, as if that way I could keep a piece of you alive in our home. Professor Weber, who had spent weeks decoding Helena's songs, made an interesting observation. Now I understand why certain melodies had such subtle variations. They weren't just different codes. They were her letters, turned into music. Helena turned to the piano, beginning to play a specific sequence. This melody. It holds the words I most wanted to say to you. Each note is a letter, each pause is a contained tear. Raphael recognized the song. It was one of the ones she played most often at the hospital, according to reports. Now, finally, he understood. It wasn't just financial code. It was a musical love letter, played over and over in the hope that one day he would hear it and understand. You have created your own language through music, Clara observed, moved. Even though you are apart, even with all the barriers, you have found a way to keep your connection alive. Professor Weber began transcribing the new melody Helena was playing. It is extraordinary how music can be both a vault for secrets and a bridge for emotions. You have created something unprecedented in the history of music and cryptography. Helena smiled, her hands dancing over the keys with renewed confidence. Music was my strength when they tried to make me forget. Every note was a promise that one day we would find our way back to each other. Raphael took another letter from the box, this one dated Christmas of the previous year. "I never gave up hope," he said. "Even though I believed you had chosen to leave, something in my heart refused to accept that our love could simply disappear." The afternoon progressed smoothly, and the couple continued to share their never-exchanged letters, their never-heard melodies, their never-spoken words. It was as if each text read, each note played, was filling the voids of a decade of forced separation. In the Muller Company's boardroom, the atmosphere was one of transformation. Raphael, accompanied by a team of lawyers and independent auditors, was leading a historic meeting with the board of directors. On the projection screen, graphs and documents recovered in Saint-Rémy revealed the extent of the scheme that Helena had uncovered. "Starting today," Raphael announced, his voice firm, "Muller Enterprises will undergo a complete restructuring. Every penny embezzled will be returned, every irregularity will be corrected." Clara, who was attending the meeting as a representative of the newly created ethics committee, presented the next slide, a musical score. "This melody," she explained, "was composed by Helena Muller 10 years ago. Within it are encoded the first hints of the irregularities she discovered, which brings us to the next announcement." Raphael stood up, adjusting his suit. "I am pleased to announce the creation of the Helena Muller Institute for Transparency and Innovation, a research center dedicated to developing new technologies for fraud prevention and whistleblower protection." The board members, many of whom had worked with Raphael's father, looked uncomfortable. One of them raised his hand. "What about the old investors?" "All previous agreements are being reviewed," Raphael replied firmly. "Those who participated in the scheme will have the chance to cooperate with justice voluntarily. Those who choose not to do so will face legal consequences." In the mansion's garden, while the meeting was taking place, Helena was working with Professor Weber on something special, a composition that would be presented at the inauguration of the institute. "This part here," she explained, marking the score, "represents the moment of discovery. How little fragments of truth came together to form a complete melody." The professor nodded, fascinated. "You are creating not just music, but a new method of historical documentation through art." Dr. Martin, who monitored Helena's progress daily, kept her own notes. "It is amazing how her recovery has accelerated since the truth came out. It is as if each new document discovered, each memory recovered, strengthens her neural connections." Helena smiled, her fingers finding a new sequence of notes on the piano. "Do you know what's most extraordinary? Now I can create music simply for the joy of it. I no longer need to hide codes or protect secrets." The sound of footsteps announced the arrival of Raphael returning from the meeting. His face showed tiredness, but his eyes shone with determination. "How was it?" Helena asked, interrupting her composition. "Transformative," he replied, sitting down beside her on the piano bench. "The company will never be the same again, and it's thanks to you, mon amour. Your music has not only preserved the truth, it has given us the chance to rebuild everything on a more solid foundation." Clara, who had arrived with Raphael, added, "The most impressive thing is how his story is inspiring others. Since the news broke, 3 other whistleblowers from different companies have reached out, seeking protection and guidance." Professor Weber stood up, gathering up his notes. "That is why the Institute is so important. It will not only be a research center, but a symbol of hope for all who are forced to choose between the truth and their safety." Helena began to play softly, a new melody emerging beneath her fingers. "This is for all of them," she said, "for every person who has ever had to hide their truth in codes and whispers. a promise that there will always be a way to make the truth heard. The auditorium of the newly opened Helena Muller Institute was packed. Financial professionals, investigative journalists, musicians, and researchers from around the world had gathered for the first international symposium on transparency and innovation in corporate governance. On stage, a Steinway grand piano took center stage. Helena, dressed in an elegant navy blue ensemble, adjusted the microphone while Professor Weber organized the scores. "They're all here," Clara whispered, peering through the side curtain, "including 3 of Europe's greatest experts on musical encryption." Raphael, sitting in the front row, watched his wife with pride. Over the past few months, Helena's recovery had exceeded all expectations of the medical team. Her brilliant mind, once trapped in a haze of induced confusion, now shone with renewed clarity. "Good afternoon," Helena began, her voice firm and clear. 10 years ago, when I discovered irregularities in the company where I worked, I faced a dilemma that many whistleblowers know well. How do you preserve the truth when all conventional avenues are blocked? His hands found the piano keys, starting a soft background melody as he continued. "Music became my salvation. Every suspicious transaction, every name involved, every detail of the scheme was transformed into musical notes, a code that no one would think to look for." Professor Weber took the microphone for a moment. "The system developed by Ms. Müller has revolutionized our understanding of the interface between music and information. It is not just cryptography. It is a new language that unites art and truth." Helena played again, this time a more complex sequence. On the screen behind her, graphs showed how each note corresponded to different types of financial data. "But beyond the technique," she continued, without stopping to play, "I discovered something even deeper. Music didn't just preserve information, it preserved my essence. When they tried to erase my memories, the melodies remained as anchors to my identity." In the audience, Dr. Martin was excitedly taking notes. Helena's case had opened new horizons in understanding memory and trauma, especially how art can create alternative pathways for preserving information in the brain. "The institute we are inaugurating today," Helena continued, "is not just a research center. It is a beacon of hope, a place where creativity and courage come together to protect those who choose to defend the truth." Raphael stood up, joining her on stage. "In the past few months, we have received more than 50 reports of wrongdoing at major corporations. Each whistleblower receives not only legal protection, but also psychological support and innovative tools to document their findings." Clara, who coordinated the Whistleblower Protection Program, added, "We are developing new technologies inspired by Helena's method, systems that allow the secure preservation of information through artistic codes, not just musical ones, but also visual and literary ones." Helena began to play a new composition, one she had created especially for the occasion. "This melody represents our commitment to the future. Each note is a promise that truth will find its way, no matter how many obstacles there are." Professor Weber handed out sheet music to the audience. Notice how the musical structure reflects principles of corporate governance. It is a symphony of transparency, where each instrument represents a different aspect of corporate responsibility. In the front row, a group of music and technology students watched in wonder. One young woman raised her hand. "How can we learn to create our own musical codes?" Helena smiled, her hands still dancing over the keys. "The Institute is launching a comprehensive educational program. We want every creative person to understand their potential, not only as an artist, but as a guardian of truth." Raphael took the microphone. "Because the most important lesson we have learned is that art is not just expression, it is protection, it is resistance, it is proof that the human spirit will always find a way to preserve what is true and just." As fine, Helena's music filled the auditorium. Clara watched the expressions of hope on the faces of the audience. What had begun as a story of injustice and separation had become a global movement of transformation and protection. In the Institute's library, now transformed into a welcoming space with jasmine plants and a grand piano, Helena led her first class for a select group of students. Amidst sheet music and cutting-edge technology, she shared not only techniques, but the essence of her discovery. Music has always been more than entertainment, she explained, playing softly. Since ancient civilizations, melodies have carried stories, preserved knowledge. What we have done is simply rediscover that potential and adapt it to the modern world. Professor Weber, who now heads the Music Coding Research Department, added, "The Helena method, as it is being called internationally, has already inspired developments in a range of areas, from digital security to cognitive therapy." Clara, the Whistleblower Protection Program supervisor, entered the room with exciting news. "We just got confirmation. The method has been approved as legal evidence in corporate lawsuits. The Supreme Court has officially recognized the validity of music encoding as a form of documentation." Helena smiled, remembering how it all began. "When I turned those first numbers into banknotes, I was just trying to survive. I never imagined it would become a tool for global change." Raphael, who had just returned from an international conference, joined the group. "And that's not all. 3 of the world's largest auditing companies are implementing specific departments to analyze data through musical standards." A young student raised her hand. "But how can we be sure our codes will remain secure?" Helena sat down at the piano, inviting the student to come closer. "You see, the beauty of music is that it speaks directly to the soul. Even if someone intercepts the melody, without the emotional key, without understanding the personal context, the data remains protected." Professor Weber nodded, showing off some complex sheet music. "It's a system that combines mathematics, emotion, and art. The security lies not just in the complexity of the code, but in the depth of the artistic expression." Clara added, "And most importantly, we are creating an international support network. Every whistleblower who uses the method has access to legal, psychological, and artistic support." Helena began to play a new composition, one she had created especially for her students. This melody contains the basic principles of the method, but note, each of you will interpret it in a unique way, because each person carries their own story, their own truths. Raphael watched with pride. The woman who once had her memories nearly erased was now leading a revolution in the way the world protected its most important truths. "The Institute," he said, "is more than a research center. It is a symbol of how art can be the most powerful form of resistance." In the garden of the Institute, new jasmines bloomed, their scent mingling with the melodies that escaped from the classrooms. Helena finished her composition with a serene smile. "You know," she told the students, "music saved me not only by its ability to hide information, but by its power to keep hope alive. Every note I played during those dark years was a promise that the truth would find its way to the light." Clara, who had become not only a colleague but a close friend, added, "And now each new person who learns the method is another guarantee that other truths will be preserved, other stories will be protected." The afternoon sun streamed through the library's stained glass windows, creating colorful patterns on the piano. Helena looked at her students, at Raphael, at everyone who had been part of her journey of recovery and transformation. "Music," she concluded, "teaches us that even in the most difficult circumstances, there is always a way to make our truth heard. We just need to find the right melody." A year had passed since the inauguration of the Institute. In the former Müller mansion, now transformed into a cultural center and headquarters of the Foundation, Helena was preparing for a special moment. The winter garden, her refuge during her days of recovery, was decorated for an intimate celebration. "Is everything ready?" Clara asked, adjusting the arrangements of fresh jasmine around the piano. Helena nodded, her fingers gently running over the keys. "I can hardly believe it's already been a year. It seems like just yesterday I was lost in my own memories." Dr. Martin, who continued to follow Helena's case as a researcher, leafed through a thick, leather-bound volume. "This book is extraordinary. It documents your method in detail, along with success stories from the Institute's first year. And to think it started with a desperate melody, Helena reflected, beginning to play softly. Raphael entered the winter garden, accompanied by Professor Weber and a select group of guests, the first whistleblowers who had used Helena's method to protect their own truths. "Mon amour," Raphael called, approaching the piano. "Are you ready to share the new composition?" Helena smiled, her eyes shining with the confidence she had regained. "This is special, a piece I composed to celebrate not only our history, but that of all who have found their voice through music." Among the guests was Mia Leone, a young executive who had uncovered irregularities at an international bank. Using Helena's method, she transformed crucial evidence into a series of waltzes. "Your courage changed my life," Mia Leone said emotionally. "When I thought there was no way out, your melodies showed me a way." Professor Weber distributed special sheet music to those present. "This composition is unique. Helena has integrated elements of each of your stories, creating a symphony of resistance and hope." Clara, who had documented each success story of the Institute, added, "In just 1 year, more than 100 people have found safe ways to preserve and share their truths through art." Helena began to play the new composition. The first notes told their own story, the discovery of the frauds, the transformation of numbers into music, the years of isolation. Gradually, other melodies intertwined with the main one, each representing a new story of courage. "I acknowledge my part," Mia Leone whispered, following the score. "It is the moment when I turned bank records into musical notes." Raphael watched his wife in awe. Helena was no longer just the woman who had survived a decade of enforced silence. She had become a beacon of hope for others, transforming her pain into an instrument of change. "Every person in this room," Helena said without stopping playing, "carries a story of courage. Each one found in music a way to protect the truth when all other paths seemed blocked." Dr. Martin scribbled notes in her research notebook. Helena's case had opened up new horizons in the understanding of trauma and recovery, showing how art could create alternative pathways for preserving not only memories, but identity itself. "The most extraordinary thing," Professor Weber commented, "is how each new case enriches the method. Each person who uses music to protect his truth adds a new dimension to the system." The melody reached its peak, the notes flowing like a river of intertwined memories and hopes. In the garden, the jasmines seemed to dance in the breeze, their scent mingling with the music. "You've given me back more than just my memories," Helena said, concluding the piece. "You've given me back my purpose. Music is no longer my hiding place. It's my way of lighting the way for others." Raphael sat down beside her on the piano bench. "And each new person who finds their voice through your method is proof that no truth can be silenced forever." Clara raised her glass in a toast. "To all the melodies yet unplayed, to all the truths waiting to be heard, may the Institute continue to be a beacon for those who choose courage." The afternoon sun streamed through the stained glass windows of the conservatory, creating a kaleidoscope of colors above the piano. Helena looked at the faces around her, each with their own story of resilience and transformation. On the night of the Institute's grand benefit concert, the municipal theater was packed to the rafters. On the stage, a Steinway grand piano glowed under the soft lights, surrounded by vases of white jasmine. Helena, elegant in a midnight blue dress, waited backstage with Raphael. "Nervous?" he asked, gently adjusting a flower in her hair. "Non, mon petit loup," Helena smiled. "For the first time in a long time, I feel completely at peace." Clara approached with the concert program. "Everything is ready. Each piece tells a different story of transformation." Professor Weber, who had helped organize the repertoire, explained, "We started with Helena's original melody, the one that held the first secrets. Then we progressed through the compositions that marked her journey of recovery, to the new pieces created in collaboration with other whistleblowers." Dr. Martin, sitting in the front row, prepared to document yet another extraordinary chapter in Helena's recovery story. Every note played today is a testament to the healing power of art. The lights dimmed, and Helena walked to the piano. The silence in the theater was absolute, as her fingers struck the first notes, the melody that had preserved the truth through a decade of enforced silence. As he played, Images were softly projected onto a large screen. Photographs of the Institute, smiling faces of people who had found their voice through music, jasmine gardens blooming in unlikely places. Raphael watched from the sidelines, his heart overflowing with love and pride. Helena was no longer the fragile woman he had met in that hospital garden. She had become a force of nature, transforming her own pain into an instrument of healing for others. The music changed, progressing to newer compositions. Each melody told a different story. The young accountant who uncovered fraud at a multinational corporation, the engineer who documented environmental irregularities, the doctor who exposed schemes at a large hospital. Clara, sitting next to Dr. Martin, whispered, "It's amazing how each story found its own musical voice." On stage, Helena began to play the final piece, an entirely new composition created especially for that night. The notes flowed like a river of memories and hopes, each chord carrying the weight of a truth finally set free. "This song," she announced between notes, "is dedicated to everyone who is still searching for their voice. To everyone who holds important truths in their hearts, waiting for the right moment to let them fly." On the screen, one last image appeared, a photo of the first group of students from the Institute, all smiling around the piano, each holding their sheet of music with their own story encoded in music. The melody reached its climax, the notes intertwining into a sonic tapestry of courage and transformation. Helena played with all her heart, each keystroke a celebration of truth that could not be silenced. As the last note rang out through the theatre, there was a moment of reverent silence before the audience erupted in applause. Raphael ran onto the stage, handing Helena a bouquet of jasmine. "You did it, mon amour," he whispered. "You turned pain into music, silence into symphony." Helena smiled, her hands still on the piano keys. "We did it, mon petit loup. And this is just the first of many melodies that will echo through this theatre." Professor Weber approached with a surprise, a special sheet of music, bound in leather, containing all the compositions that documented Helena and the Institute's journey. "Lest we ever forget," he said, "that music is more than art. It is a refuge for important truths, a shelter for brave hearts." Clara and Dr. Martin joined them on stage, each carrying a white rose. "With each new student who comes to the Institute," Clara said, "we tell their story, Helena. And each of them finds, in your courage, the inspiration to create their own true melody." The theatre continued to applaud, but Helena barely heard it. Her eyes were fixed on the jasmines in her hands, their scent so similar to that of that first garden where her story of redemption had begun. "The music goes on," she said softly, more to herself than to others. "And as long as there are people willing to turn their truth into melody, no silence will be strong enough to silence us."